everybody. It's a lovely, bright, sunny day, although it's still a little bit cold out, being the first weekend in April. Yay, we made it! And I didn't get as much reading done in March as I wanted to, unfortunately. More landlord nonsense. I hope it ends soon, I really do. It is, however, TransGirlApril, so today I'm going to review Transmuted by Eve Harms. Now, for the upcoming month, I hope to get some more. I hope to read at least one more book by a trans woman, and also, it's April is poetry month, so I'll probably try to get some poetry read. And we're getting into Stoker season, so April usually I do try to get some something read somewhere by a Stoker nominee. So that's kind of my vague plan for the next few weeks. Along with the usual. So, Transmuted by Eve Harms. Now, this has been on my radar for quite a while. I've been meaning to read it, and it's been on my TBR list, and I think I had it lined up as one of my KU picks, but then I had to give it back, and then I had to download it again this time, because it was no longer in my list. I've been following Unnerving Press for some time, and I do follow Eve Harms over on Twitter, so it's kind of just been in the radar. Oh, and I'm gobsmacked by what's going on in the States right now with the violently anti-trans sentiment. Just wow. So I do have a few thoughts that I want to add at the end of the review. Okay, I'm going to say this as somebody who lives in a civilized country that is quite often just thought of, America's annoying little brother or whatever. But from the rest of the world to America, you people have lost your fucking minds. What is wrong with you? Okay, so that's all. I'm going to put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to it in a minute. But I'm going to talk about Transmuted first. This one was a really fun ride. I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and it's a pretty quick read. It's only about 72 pages. And a heck of a lot happens in that 72 pages. So the story is about Isa, who's a trans woman, and when the story first opens, she's just spent a lot of time raising $40,000 so she can have facial feminization surgery. Except the short form of it is FFS, which also means for fuck's sake, which just cracks me up every time I see it. I know I've got like the most juvenile sense of humor. And she spends a lot of time online gaming, and she hides behind an avatar. And one of the funny things that I thought of was when I read Udoru by William Gibson, how prescient the idea of people spending most of their lives online hiding behind avatars really was. I just thought of that, and I was like, wow, he really did call it, didn't he? 20 odd years later, Eudora came out in 96. Now, obviously, this premise is more of what happens in the real world now, which was totally, some kind of futuristic fiction 25 years ago. But anyway, so Isa spends all her time, and I'm going to say it is Isa because I knew a girl named Isa, spelled ISA. If it's Isa, I do apologize, but it looks like Isa to me. So Isa has just spent time and managed to raise the 40 grand that she needs to get her surgery, and she's really looking forward to it, along with sort of the reticence and self-loathing that has led her to this place. And she's, overweight, a little bit scruffy, absolutely despises the masculine side of herself. And so she reveals her face for what she hopes is going to be the last time to her, her followers. And then she gets a call from her sister. Now, one of the things that I found was really interesting about about how quickly the setup happened for this book was how much is said about the family dynamic in this, in such a short time. So it turns out that their father has cancer, and needs, and they want to try some kind of experimental thing, but it's going to cost most of the money that ISIS just raised. Now, personally, I'd say no, because I'm going to spend the money and fucker's going to die anyway. So no, you can't have it. It's mine. Fuck you. And also, generally, as far as I'm aware, with any fundraising that I've ever done, if you don't use the money for the purpose that it was intended for, you have to give it back. So I just hide behind that. I'd be like, nope, can't use it for anything other than what I raised it for. But that's me. I'm selfish and I'm a bitch. So, and I spend enough time being screwed over by my family members anyway. So I just would be like, no, sorry, can't screw myself to help you. Bye. But that would be me. So anyway, her family talks her into, giving this money up, which means that she doesn't have enough left for the surgery that she so desperately needs that will help her. So unfortunately, or fortunately, she sees an Instagram ad advertising a new miracle cure for trans women. Do you want to look like this? And it, the models are all these, gorgeous hot blondes. And of course, Liza's like, can you make me look like that? Which, if an Instagram ad pops up, you're going to want to be a little bit, want to be a little bit reticent. But of course, she goes and she tries it. And it's, okay, so the guy's name is Dr. Skirm, Skurm. Now, if that is a name that I would run fast, run far away from, absolutely. So she gets the treatment and it's horrifying. And it's a extreme body modification that starts to happen to her. And at first it's great. But then it just starts to get worse and worse and worse. And it's, I won't tell you any more about what happens, except that she starts to be more confident in herself, and she starts to date, and she has this lovely woman named Raina that she starts to see. And Eve also has a best friend named Mitzi, who is also trans. I think Raina's trans too. And they're also artists, and Mitzi makes these, and this is actually where the cover art comes from. Mitzi likes to make paintings of horrible melting clowns for some reason. I don't know. It's hysterical. And as I said, the book packs a heck of a lot of stuff going on into a very short amount of time. So the pace of it is very quick, and it starts to go, so it's like, it starts out not so great, gets better, and then it's bad, and then it's bad, and then it just goes right off the rails. It's just a wicked ride. It's really fun, and there's a lot of body horror. There's a lot of every twist and turn. It's like, oh, come on. Oh, come on. How much more is there? But there's a lot of garish and, extreme descriptions, and you picture, as it's describing, there's like, you can see all these incredibly colorful, carnivalesque, monstrous kind of things flying at you, and it's a lot of fun. It's a fun read, and I would highly recommend, just if you just want a nice fun little time to pass, fun little read to pass the time on a Sunday, as I did. It's a quick read, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Transmuted by Eve Harms. Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to add though is some of the descriptions. One of the things that was interesting about the way that the character was drawn is the way that you really get into this person's head, and this person is so depressed, and there's just this incredible air of self-loathing. And while the treatment was going on, I was thinking, on the one hand, it would be really nice if someone was able to transform themselves so easily. I mean, step into a vat of goo, have a few minutes of pain, and then suddenly you're a new person. But with the price that you have to pay for it, are there people who would be desperate enough to do that? And there probably are. And it's wonderful that surgery and hormone therapy exists, but there are a lot of people that can't afford it, that would be desperate enough to do this kind of thing. And we see that in botched operations, jobs done by butchers, just all the time. It's rare, but it does happen. And it made me sad. It made me very sad that somebody can be so desperate and self-loathing enough that they would have to do this. And then the result of it in the end is so much worse than they were off before, because they were desperate and had to go with something because they couldn't afford the proper care. It's just horrific. And I think that was sort of the underlying implication of what a person goes through or can go through when they're born in the wrong body and they don't have the resources. So, speaking of which, okay, so now that my review is over, now comes the rant, because oh my God. Anti-trans sentiment has gotten so extreme in the States that they're starting to try and pass legislature that will force adults to detransition. I think it's Idaho where they're trying to push this through, where they're going to not allow insurance providers to cover hormone replacement therapy and all of the medical treatments for trans people, and force them, adults, to detransition. And they're like, oh, we want to save the children. Oh, it's people under 26. But under 26, 18 to 25 is still an adult. So problem number one. Problem number two, in Florida, they want to pass legislation to make it a felony to be in drag in public. And yet this is an open carry state. These are people who are more afraid of men in dresses than they are of men with guns. What the fuck? Also in Florida, and why is it always fucking Florida? What is wrong with Florida? Is it something in the water that makes them hateful and stupid? So, Vice magazine, I'll put a link in the thing so you can check it out. They're trying, in Florida, they're trying to pass a bill that will make it that insurance providers are not allowed to pay for hormone replacement therapy or any surgery that affects primary or secondary sex characteristics. Okay, this is a big fucking problem, and not just for trans people. See, this stuff flies under the radar because most people don't give a fuck. Really, realistically, truthfully, look at your life, at your meet space. Not the people you know online. There's plenty of people you meet online, lots of different people, lots of different walks of life. I follow a number of people on social media who are trans or who have family members who are trans, and they're lovely people. All they want to do is live their life, right? But in my meet space, I think I can think of two people. One is the child of a friend of mine, and the other is a girl that worked very briefly at my office. I met her once, and she decided it wasn't for her, and she quit. Okay, so these are the only two people that I've interacted with in like a very long time in meet space. And I mean, fuck, live your life. I don't give a fuck what anybody does with their own body. It's their body. Let them. Like, what the fuck? I don't care. But, and most people don't. But this is the problem with not interacting with people. We don't think about it until it affects us. Here's the problem with forcing insurance companies in the States. And by the way, Americans need socialized healthcare, which is an entirely different rant. But they want to force through legislation that will prevent insurance providers from, I mean, they're so violently anti-trans that they won't allow them to cover a surgery that affects the primary and secondary sex characteristics. Now, if you don't think that this is going to be a problem for you, think about primary and secondary sex characteristics. Hormone replacement affects women who are going through menopause. Surgically altering prostate, testicles, ovaries, uterus, mastectomies. Who are the people that are most affected by these surgeries? Not trans people. Cancer patients. Even if you don't know anybody fucking trans, the wording is so vague, they might make it so that cancer patients can't get this operation. And this legislation is written by idiot politicians. This guy is not, the guy writing this shit is not a doctor. He's a fucking moron. Okay, I'm sorry. I've been reading this stuff and I'm like, are you fucking for real? What is wrong with these people? Like, they're just so vehemently opposed to somebody doing what they want with their own body and living their own fucking life that they have to affect everyone. I mean, we'll stand up for trans rights. Everybody says, oh, you're woke. Go woke, go broke. You don't push that in other people's faces, blah, 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 blah. But no, this is going to affect a lot of people. And the other thing that is going to affect a lot of people, and this is where it's another big fucking problem, they want to make things that they don't agree with into a felony. In Florida, they want to make getting an abortion a felony. They want to make dressing in drag in public a fucking felony. And you know, it's not even because any of the actual voters care. It's an insidious way, and I'll remind you this, felons can't vote. So if you have somebody that you don't like, that you think is going to vote you out of fucking office, disenfranchise them. That's going to be the New World Order. And you know what? That's fucking fascism 101. That's fucking fascism. In a democracy, and Americans are always going on about America, freedom, blah, 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 blah. The number one right that everybody has in America, whether they are a homeless bum on the streets or the fucking living in their ivory tower, top of the fucking food chain financially, doesn't matter. Everyone gets a vote. And when you've got people sneaking in laws that don't allow that, you have lost every fucking modicum of freedom you can ever claim. So that's my rant. I'm horrified at what is going on in the States right now. It's just insanity. Like, they've lost their fucking minds. And, you know, here's a really ironic, funny thing. There's two things that a basic biology class might teach some of these people. That's one of the really unfortunate things about a lot of places in the US too, where their entire approach to sex education is don't. How does that help anybody? So there's an excellent documentary that I think everybody should see. It's called The Fight to Be Male. It was made by the BBC in like a long time ago, like 1979, possibly as late as the early 80s, but it's a very old documentary and it still holds up, you know, almost 50 years later. And what it does is it looks, the basic premise is, they never state it outright, but is gender biological, so nature, or is it a condition of your upbringing, your environment? Is it nature or is it nurture? And the surprising thing about it is that, yeah, in a lot of cases, it's about half and half. So this argument that you are what you're born with and that's it is absolute bullshit. And if anybody spent some time understanding how the gender process works, they would be able to realize that, hey, yeah, no, that's not how it works at all. So, I'm really bad at this, so if I garble the explanation, that's why. It's very complicated. But they explain how, you know, you've got, you know, a little sperm and a little egg, and they come together, and essentially you've got all of this over here that presents as feminine, and then you've got this over here which wiggles its way in, which is a very complicated set of chemical reactions. And I heard somebody describe it as, we're not one or the other. Every one of us is basically a soup of hormones and chemicals. And how we turn out, it really depends on a whole lot of how the soup is going to get stirred that day. So there's a whole complicated set of chemical reactions that happens. And then you kind of have characteristics one way, or you maybe kind of look the other way. Everything else is just how you're raised, what your culture says, how you think about yourself, you know. And it went on to, it was really interesting, the documentary itself. It looked at different cases from around the world of people who were considered transgender, but because most cultures kind of say you're kind of one or the other, generally people tended toward being male or presenting as masculine or presenting as feminine. So the cases that I remember, there was a fellow in somewhere, I think he was somewhere in the Bahamas, and he had been raised as a male. And in his culture, obviously, there's more benefit to being male. But he was fully intersex. He had one testicle, one ovary. He had a penis. He had a vagina. He did menstruate. But chromosomally, like his chromosome chart said that he was female. When he grew breasts, he decided to fully get the gender affirmation surgery and fully become male. But according to, you know, people would say he's biologically female, but he really wasn't. And culturally, I mean, he'd always been a guy. He'd been raised as a guy. He believed he was a guy. And then there was another woman who was she was in the UK, and by the time she was like 16 or 17, she hadn't menstruated yet. She presented as female. She'd always been female. So they ran all the tests on her, and the doctor sat her down and they said, you know, you're never going to have kids. Intercourse will be very limited. And she had testes instead of ovaries. They just never dropped, right? So in England, she was legally a woman. In Scotland, she was legally a man. But she'd lived her whole life as a woman and presented as a woman, and that's how she lived, and so on. And so they looked at various cases, you know, various places. And the other one that I thought was absolutely fascinating was that, now, okay, I always botched this in my high school biology classes. I was like really bad at this because there's like follicle hormone stimulant, and there's like all these chemical things that happen when your body's getting ready to do basic things that you assign to gender, whether it's like menstruation or... So there was a doctor in Germany who had figured out that the brain sends a signal to the uterus, and the uterus sends a signal back when it's getting ready to do certain lady things. I can't remember exactly what it was, whether it was like menstruation or whether it was something else. But he called it the womb response. So he did a test on a sample of gay men, and he artificially created this brain to womb signal. And every one of the gay guys had a womb response. But, I mean, there's cis men who also happen to be gay. I'm not sure what precisely the doctor was looking for. It's never outright stated that he was looking for a cure for homosexuality or anything, but it was just a really interesting experiment that I always thought was kind of just, you know, so the idea that your brain and your body somehow are masculine or they're feminine is not a function of biology. It's not a function of science or hormones or whatever else. most of it is culture. Most of it is, and this is another thing that we leave out, is that our language is binary. Something is on or it's off. Something is male or it's female. We have a lot of preconceived ideas that something cannot be on a spectrum. Something cannot be somewhere in the middle. Something cannot be or not be. Right? I think that was Parmenides. What is and cannot not be. But the more we understand about the world around us, I think the more opportunity opens up. And the other thing that I always like to leave people with, I read this article. Okay, now this was scary. There are some people who consider themselves Christian fundamentalists, who consider themselves, the New World Order and blah, 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 blah. They really are looking at it as some sort of anti-trans genocide, and that it is some kind of holy war against, anything that isn't God or Jesus or whatever bullshit they're fucking spewing that day is satanic. And somehow the absolutely delicious irony is absolutely lost on them. Because here's a fun fact. Parthenogenesis does exist in nature. It happens when the egg splits without being fertilized, which means that as the cells grow, there's no Y chromosome. It's just a single X, right? I mean, if you remember your high school biology, if it's a girl, it's got 2 X chromosomes. If it's a boy, it's got an X and a Y chromosome. And the X and Y chromosomes, they developed as an evolutionary thing, as we got more and more complex. So when parthenogenesis occurs, it has a single X chromosome. So it presents as female. So that means if it truly was a virgin birth, Mary contributed an X chromosome. Jesus did not have a Y chromosome. Jesus was a trans man. So, shout out to all our trans girl friends for TransGirlApril. Bigger show of support for the trans community in general. Friday, March 31st was the Trans Day of Visibility. Hope everybody's safe. Hope everybody's happy. I hope you're reading lots of horror. Have a great day.